It's interesting how far you can travel without any transport. In the case of Cleveleys, right through the bottom of the barrel. The town, as I try to think of it when I'm in a generous mood, wasn't always known as Cleveleys. Back in medieval times it was called Rotherham, meaning the hamlet by the river. Said river being the river. Not a terribly invented name, because river just meant river, which ran close by St Andrew's Church. The river's gone now, along with the original name of Rotherham and the town's last shreds of conviviality. Rotherham's metamorphosis from a subdued village into a congested retirement home. Seriously, the combination of heavy traffic and nonagenarians is just asking for trouble. Seems to have occurred circa 1906. Not coincidentally at the same time that the Cleveleys Cottage exhibition was announced. Said cottages being centred around what are nowadays Stockgrove Way, West Drive and Whiteside Way. The prices of these cottages range from £100 to £200. It's hard to believe, but as advertised on the back of the brochure, Ivy Cottage, a 3-bedroom property fully furnished by Bickerstaff Limited, was on the market for the princely sum of £62 10 shillings. Said brochure promoted the exhibition thus: "The practical side is very important, but not the less so the aesthetic. Cheap and nasty is not the motto." Perhaps not, but a foreshadowing of things to come, possibly. The brochure explains that its main priority was the desire to exchange the bustle and the worry and the dirtiness of city life for quiet and restfulness and cleanliness of life in the country. We're not sure where the dream turned into a nightmare, but we estimate it to be somewhere around the junction of West Drive and Russell Road. We can travel further back into history and beyond, however. There's a prehistoric forest, or what remains of one, on the beach off Jubilee Gardens. It's not as impressive as you might imagine, but it has associations with Singleton Thorpe, one of those legendary coastal villages allegedly destroyed by some long-forgotten flood. You know the sort, where the church bells can still be heard under the ocean after several pints. In 1877, somebody called C.E. Rance went looking for the remains, and apparently found horse troughs and shippons full of seawater. Almost a century later, the Evening Gazette related how Mr. Jowett had discovered a metal pot embedded in the roots of a tree, recently uncovered by the scouring action of the tides opposite Carr Gate. In reality, however, the chances are that the legend of Singleton Thorpe is just a load of old cobblers. Obviously not everybody agrees with that sentiment, so complaints to the usual address, please. Then there's the Towers, once known back in the mists of time as Villa Wood. A squirrel-infested urban oasis secreted at the centre of a labyrinth of peaceful avenues, where only the local hedgehogs and suicidal teenagers know of its existence. Nowadays, the Towers is used as a meeting point for the wire rangers. Back in 1913, however, the healthy Cleveleys brochure advertised the famous champion con of Cleveleys, who holds an international reputation. Winner of 25 championships. This record has never been equalled by any Dane in any part of the world. Stud fee, £4 4 shillings. In case you're worried, the advert ends. Apply Kennelman, The Towers, Thornton-Cleveleyes, telephone 22, Cleveleys. Telephone numbers were easier to remember back then. The Kennelman referred to was Mr. Kerwin, the owner of the original Cleveleys Inn. Not only did the Towers over its lifespan act as a kennels, but it was also the Highfield Girls' College, or the School in the Garden, run by Miss E. Aitken and Miss G. In more recent times, although still a great many years ago as the chronological crow flies, I remember climbing the tallest tree in the Towers to a dizzying height of at least 2,000 feet, perching on the uppermost branches and surveying the filed and wire through a pair of binoculars. It was a stupid thing for a 40-odd-year-old man to do now that I come to look back on it, but I was extremely drunk. Off the coast of nearby Little Bispam lies the wreck of the Obama. On December the 22nd, 1894, the 1,200-ton three-masted bark from Norway ran into a typical Fylde Coast hurricane, and as a consequence a great deal of trouble. The crew of 17 were all rescued by the Samuel Fletcher and taken to the safety of the Old Red Lion Inn. Animal lovers will be pleased to hear that the captain's dog was also rescued. According to Ralph Smedley's Thornton-Cleveleys Remembered, the drenched seamen were treated to hot coffee and rum, and being the more finely built fellows, courted an excessive amount of attention from the young ladies. Not our words, we're just quoting from Ralph Smedley's book here. We wouldn't want to imply that the men of Bispam were all weedy and useless by comparison. Anyhow, in due course, the bell of the Obama was presented to Robert Hindle of the Cleveleyes Hotel, now long since demolished and replaced by an amusement arcade or something, who had raised the alarm. He in turn donated it to the forerunner of St Andrew's Church, which amounted to a shed known as the Institute. Here, Reverend Everard Healy, parents seriously didn't care what they called their kids back in those days, used the bell to call the worshippers to prayer. Perhaps our favourite part of this whole sorry affair, however, took place on the Saturday night following the disaster, when, shortly after midnight, a mysterious conveyance drove up to the wreck at low water. In the morning, the side of the bark had been painted with the legend Beecham's Pills, proving, if nothing else, that every cloud has a silver lining, especially if you're an opportunist with a pot of paint handy. What else can we tell you about Cleveleys that isn't potentially slanderous? It's got a duck pond where the shelter's currently burnt to a crisp, and central to the town there's another shelter called the Birdcage. The four-phase clock doesn't work on that, as far as I'm aware. It never did. When I was an angst-driven teenager, I slept up there because I had nowhere else to go. I've led an interesting sort of life, all told. Speaking of which, this is my old school, or rather it was. Nowadays it's a community church, whatever one of them is. That's because all of the kids who went there with me are now old fogies, the average age of a Cleveleys resident being 97. The place is full of old biddies and memories that I'd rather forget, so that being said, let's bring this episode to a close. Click like, subscribe, and join us again for the next exciting episode of uninteresting crap I found on the hard drive because we haven't got any transport.